The air in the Orion Club was as cold and sterile as a surgical suite, and Caroline Vance, the lounge manager, wielded her authority with the precision of a scalpel. She looked at the woman standing before her, a silent judgment clouding her professionally polite expression. The woman was black, dressed in a simple but elegant cashmere travel set that whispered wealth rather than screaming it. But to Caroline it didn't matter. She saw only someone who didn't fit the curated image of their exclusive clientele. What she couldn't see was that this woman wasn't just a guest. She was a titan, a ghost in the machine of global finance, and her name wasn't just on a list. It was etched into the very foundation of the walls around them. And Caroline was about to learn that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. The hum of New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport was a familiar symphony of chaos to Dr. Evelyn Reed. It was a sound she'd grown accustomed to, the auditory backdrop to a life lived between continents. She had just stepped off a 9-hour flight from Geneva, where she'd delivered the keynote address at the World Biotechnology Forum. Her mind was still buzzing with complex protein structures and the ethical implications of genetic sequencing, but her body was succumbing to the deep, bone-wearying fatigue of transatlantic travel. All she wanted was an hour of peace. A comfortable chair, a glass of still water with lemon, and the quiet sanctity of the Orion Club, the premium lounge operated by Ascendia Global. Her membership was top-tier, a perk that came with her portfolio, a small but significant detail in a life of significant details. She approached the sleek, frosted glass doors of the lounge. A polished chrome sign read, Orion Club, by invitation only. Inside, muted tones of grey and navy soft recessed lighting, and the hushed murmur of the privileged promised a sanctuary from the bustling terminal. At the podium stood a woman who seemed moulded from the lounge's very aesthetic. She was sharp blonde, and her name tag read, Caroline Vance Lounge Manager. Her smile was a perfectly painted, unmoving line. "Good morning," Evelyn said, her voice warm but tired. She held up her phone, displaying the QR code for her digital pass. "Dr. Evelyn Reed." Caroline's eyes flickered from the phone to Evelyn's face, then performed a subtle but unmistakable top-to-bottom scan. She took in the simple, charcoal grey cashmere tracksuit, the comfortable-looking, yet clearly expensive leather sneakers, and the single unadorned carry-on bag. There was no flashy designer handbag, no dripping jewelry. To Caroline, Evelyn didn't register on the radar of expected clientele. She looked comfortable, and in Caroline's rulebook, comfort was the antithesis of status. "One moment, please," Caroline said, her tone clipped. She tapped at her computer terminal, her manicured fingers making sharp, clicking sounds. A frown creased her brow. "I'm sorry, the system doesn't seem to be recognizing this pass." Evelyn's heart sank, not with panic, but with a weary sense of predictability. "That's strange," she replied calmly. "It's linked directly to my Ascendia Black card. Perhaps you could try typing in my name." "I've tried," Caroline lied, smoothly not having done so. "There seems to be a network issue with some of our partner airlines today. We're only accepting physical membership cards at the moment." It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. In a world of digital, everything a high-end club reverting to physical cards was absurd. "I wasn't aware of that policy change," Evelyn said, keeping her voice even. "I don't carry the physical card. The digital pass has always been sufficient." "Well, policy was updated this morning for security reasons," Caroline insisted, her smile tightening. Her gaze drifted past Evelyn to a man in a rumpled but obviously expensive suit who was swaggering up behind her. "I'm sure you understand." Evelyn understood perfectly. She understood the unspoken language of exclusion, the subtle art of making someone feel they didn't belong. She had a PhD in molecular biology, held patents that were changing medicine, and managed a venture capital fund that shaped industries. But in this moment, she was just a black woman being told no by a gatekeeper in a power suit. The man behind her huffed impatiently. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice laced with the entitlement of a man who had never been told to wait. Caroline turned her full attention to him, her smile suddenly becoming genuine. "Not at all, sir. My apologies. Just sorting out a little confusion." She gestured for him to proceed, and as he swiped his card, it beeped green instantly. He shot Evelyn a smirk as he walked past, as if to say, "See, that's how it's done." The humiliation was a sharp, bitter taste in Evelyn's mouth. It was public, deliberate, and demeaning. "Look," Caroline said, turning back to Evelyn, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, condescending whisper. "The food court in this terminal is actually quite good. They have a new artisan pizza place. I can even give you a voucher for a complimentary soda." She was offering a soda voucher to a woman who could buy the entire pizza franchise with the interest from her checking account. The sheer audacity of it was almost breathtaking. For a moment, Evelyn was tempted to let the fire inside her rage, to pull out her phone, make one call, and bring the entire edifice of Carolyn Vance's little kingdom crashing down around her. She could have Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Ascendia Global, on the phone in 30 seconds. He would certainly take her call. But she was tired. And more than that, she was a strategist. A direct confrontation here in the middle of the terminal would be messy and unsatisfying. It would give Caroline the dramatic scene she might secretly crave. No reckoning required precision, not passion. It required the quiet, undeniable weight of consequence. Evelyn simply looked at Caroline, a long, unblinking stare that held no anger, only a profound and chilling disappointment. "No, thank you," Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the air with the sharpness of glass. "I'll find somewhere else to wait." She turned and walked away, her posture erect, her pace unhurried. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Caroline, feeling a surge of misplaced victory, watched her go, convinced she had successfully protected the pristine exclusivity of the Orion Club. She smoothed her blazer, took a sip of water, and waited for the next guest, completely oblivious to the fact that she hadn't just denied entry to a passenger. She had slammed the door in the face of her own future. Evelyn found a relatively quiet spot near her departure gate, sinking into one of the uncomfortable, rigid plastic chairs that were the great equalizer of air travel. The contrast between the cold, hard seat beneath her and the plush armchair she had envisioned in the lounge was a physical manifestation of the insult she'd just endured. For a few moments, she closed her eyes, not in anger, but in a state of controlled analysis. This wasn't new. It was a death by 1,000 cuts a lifetime of small dismissive gestures and systemic hurdles that she had learned to navigate with a grace that cost her an invisible reserve of energy. There was the time a real estate agent assumed she was the assistant, not the buyer of the multi-million-dollar penthouse. The time a waiter at a Michelin-starred restaurant handed the wine list to her white male colleague, despite her being the host. The time a conference organizer tried to redirect her to the spousal brunch instead of the investors' roundtable. Each time she had handled it with quiet dignity, choosing her battles, preserving her energy for the fights that truly mattered, securing funding for life-saving research, breaking barriers in a male-dominated industry, building a legacy. But today felt different. The sheer, unadulterated smugness on Carolyn Vance's face had struck a nerve. It wasn't just a slight. It was a declaration. "You are not one of us." The irony was crushing. One of us, Evelyn, thought a humorless smile touching her lips. "My dear, I am not one of you. I am one of the people who signs your paychecks." She pulled out her phone. Her first instinct was to call Marcus Thorne directly, but that felt too reactionary. A CEO's time was valuable, and this needed to be handled with finesse. Instead, she dialed a different number. "David," she said, when the call connected. "How was your landing?" David Chen, her partner at Reed Innovations, and a brilliant mind in his own right, answered from another terminal at the same airport. "Smooth. Just grabbing a coffee before our flight to LA. You in the lounge?" "About that," Evelyn said, her voice betraying none of the earlier sting. "I had a bit of a hiccup at the Orion Club." She recounted the story factually, and without emotion, detailing Caroline's policy, excuse the offer of a soda voucher, and the dismissive attitude. David, who had known Evelyn for 15 years, was silent on the other end, but she could feel his fury simmering through the phone. "Are you kidding me?" He finally exploded, his voice, low but intense. "Evelyn, this is outrageous. Ascendia Global, the company we poured $12 million into during their Series B funding, the company whose international expansion plan you personally greenlit, the very same," Evelyn confirmed. The Orion Club at JFK was the flagship project of that expansion. David continued, his voice rising in disbelief. "Your name is practically on the deed. Did you tell her who you were?" "What would that have accomplished, David?" Evelyn reasoned. "It would have become a he said, she said situation. She would have apologized, profusely blamed the system, and I would have looked like another entitled customer throwing a tantrum. The underlying issue, the rot at the core of her decision-making, would have remained. She wouldn't learn anything. She'd just learn to be more careful about who she discriminates against." David went quiet, processing her logic. "You're right, of course. You're always strategic." "So what's the play?" "Patience," Evelyn said. "Marcus Thorne is due in New York this week. I believe he's flying out today, as a matter of fact. He mentioned wanting to do a surprise spot check on the JFK lounge operations. Let's allow him to conduct his inspection. Let's see what kind of culture he's truly fostering. An email from me now would just be a complaint. My presence later will be a lesson." "A lesson," David repeated, a slow smile evident in his voice. "I like the sound of that. What do you need from me?" "Just confirmation. Pull up our investment agreement with Ascendia Global. Find the clause about investor relations and site access privileges. Send it to my inbox. And perhaps send a courtesy email to Marcus's executive assistant. Nothing alarming. Just a note saying that I'm in the terminal and was hoping to connect with him for 5 minutes before his flight at his convenience." "Consider it done," David said. "I'll see you at the gate for the LA flight. And Evelyn, don't let them get to you." "They're not," she said honestly. "They're just providing a valuable data point." She ended the call and leaned her head back against the wall. A data point. That's what it was. An indicator of a systemic failure. And Dr. Evelyn Reed was, if nothing else, an expert at analyzing systems and correcting their flaws. Meanwhile, back inside the pristine walls of the Orion Club, Caroline Vance was basking in the glow of her perceived competence. She was recounting the incident to one of the junior hostesses, a young woman named Brenda. "You have to be firm," Carolyn instructed, polishing an already gleaming countertop. "This is a premium brand. It's about maintaining an atmosphere. Some people just try to push their luck, assuming the rules don't apply to them." You could see from a mile away she wasn't our usual clientele. Brenda nodded, but a flicker of discomfort crossed her face. The woman had seemed perfectly polite to her. Her pass looked valid on the scanner for a second, though before the error message came up. She offered timidly. Caroline shot her a sharp look. It was a glitch, and it's our job to err on the side of caution. Protecting the integrity of the club is priority number one. The moment you start making exceptions, the floodgates open. Just then, Caroline's desk phone buzzed. It was an internal alert from corporate headquarters. She picked it up, her voice, instantly, shifting to a sweeter, more professional tone. Caroline Vance. It was Marcus Thorne's executive assistant. Caroline, just a heads up. Mr. Thorne's arrival is imminent. He's ahead of schedule and will be at your location within the hour for his review. Please ensure everything is in order. Of course, Caroline chirped. We're always ready for Mr. Thorne. It will be a pleasure to welcome him. She hung up the phone, a thrill running through her. A visit from the CEO. This was her chance. A flawless inspection today could be her ticket to the regional director position she coveted. She smoothed her hair and scanned the lounge. Everything was perfect. The floors were gleaming. The buffet was immaculate, and the clientele was a satisfyingly homogeneous mix of white men in suits. She had done her job well. She had curated the perfect atmosphere. She was ready for her moment in the spotlight. An hour later, Marcus Thorne swept into the Orion Club like a controlled weather system. He was a man in his late 40s, radiating an aura of restless energy and sharp intelligence that seemed to charge the air around him. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit, no tie, exuding the modern, approachable authority of a new generation CEO. His eyes, however, missed nothing. They darted around the room, assessing, calculating, and judging. Caroline was on him in an instant, her professional smile plastered on her face, her demeanor a masterclass in corporate sycophancy. Mr. Thorne, welcome to JFK. It's an honor to have you. I trust your journey to the airport was smooth, she gushed. Caroline, good to see you, Marcus replied, his handshake firm and brief. He was already looking past her, scanning the room. Everything looks good. Quiet today. We strive for a serene environment, sir, Caroline said, falling into step beside him as he began a slow walk through the lounge. We've had a very orderly morning. I run a tight ship. No issues to report. She decided to subtly drop a hint of her earlier triumph. We did have to turn a few people away earlier. You know how it is, people trying to gain access with questionable credentials. It's vital we protect the exclusivity our members pay for. Marcus grunted in agreement, though his attention seemed elsewhere. Exclusivity is one thing, Caroline. Hospitality is another. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Our brand is built on making the right people feel not just accommodated, but truly seen and valued. Of course, sir. Valued. That's the perfect word, she said, nodding enthusiastically, completely missing the nuance in his statement. She led him on a tour, pointing out the newly stocked premium Scotch selection, the high-speed fiber-optic Wi-Fi she had overseen the installation of, and the sound-dampening panels in the business center. She was performing, hitting all her marks, confident she was showcasing a flawlessly managed operation. Marcus seemed pleased enough, nodding at the right moments, asking pointed questions about cost per guest and staff turnover. But there was a persistent distraction about him. He kept glancing at the expensive Swiss watch on his wrist, then toward the entrance of the lounge. "Are you expecting someone, Mr. Thorne?" Caroline asked, trying to sound helpful. "As a matter of fact, I am," he said, his eyes sweeping the lounge one last time. "I'm hoping to catch one of our most important stakeholders before a flight. An early investor. Notoriously private, rarely makes requests, so when they do, I listen. Goes by ER on most of our correspondence." Caroline's mind immediately raced. ER. She pictured some stoic, elderly titan of industry, an Edward Rochester or an Edmund Rockefeller, A man, an old white man like the ones who filled the leather chairs around them. She felt a renewed sense of pride. The lounge was in perfect condition to receive such a person. She had ensured it. "Well," she said with confidence, "if they are one of our esteemed members, I assure you they will be well taken care of. We haven't had anyone by those initials check in yet. But I'll keep a sharp eye out." Marcus gave her a tight, unreadable smile. "I'd appreciate that." Just then, his phone vibrated with a text message. He glanced down at the screen, and the change in his demeanor was instantaneous and profound. The casual confidence evaporated, replaced by a sharp, focused concern that bordered on alarm. The muscles in his jaw tightened. He looked up, his eyes locking on Carolyn's, and his voice was suddenly low and serious. "Where is the nearest terminal gate for flights to Los Angeles?" Confused by the sudden shift, Carolyn stammered, Gates B20 through B28 just down the main concourse to the left, sir." He didn't reply. His thumb was already flying across his phone's screen, typing a response. A moment later, his phone rang. He answered it on the first ring, turning away from Carolyn to give himself a modicum of privacy. "Evelyn." He said, his voice a mixture of professional warmth and genuine apology. "My sincerest apologies. My assistant just forwarded me your message. I was hoping to see you in here." Caroline, who was pretending to adjust a floral arrangement nearby, froze. The name hung in the air. Evelyn. It couldn't be. Marcus was still talking his back to her. "What do you mean you had a check-in issue? No, don't you move an inch. You've had enough inconvenience for one day. I'm coming out to you right now. Just stay right where you are." He ended the call and spun around his face, a thunderous mask of controlled fury. The approachable CEO was gone, replaced by a commander on a war footing. He strode toward the exit with such speed and purpose that staff and guests alike moved out of his way. "Mr. Thorne, is everything all right?" Caroline asked, scurrying to keep up with him, a sick, churning feeling starting in the pit of her stomach. "Who is Evelyn?" Marcus didn't break his stride. He pushed open the frosted glass doors and stepped out into the main terminal, his eyes scanning the crowds. "Evelyn," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is ER." Caroline stopped dead in her tracks. The two letters ER echoed in her mind, reconfiguring themselves from the imagined Edward Rochester to the horrifyingly real Evelyn Reed. Her blood ran cold. She felt a wave of dizziness as the implications crashed down on her. The woman in the cashmere tracksuit, the woman she had patronizingly offered a soda voucher to, the woman she had judged, dismissed, and humiliated. Her gaze followed Marcus's, and she saw him. He was striding directly toward the seating area by gate B22, and there, rising gracefully to her feet, was the woman, Dr. Evelyn Reed. Caroline watched in abject horror as the CEO of Ascendia Global approached the woman she had cast out his face, a mixture of deep respect and profound apology. The storm had not just gathered, it had found its center, and she was standing directly in its path. The public concourse of the terminal, once a backdrop for Caroline's petty power play, now felt like a sprawling stage for her own humiliation. From her vantage point at the lounge entrance, she watched the scene unfold with a sense of surreal dread, as if viewing a car crash in slow motion. Marcus Thorne reached Dr. Reed and extended his hand, not for a perfunctory shake, but in a gesture of sincere deference. "Evelyn, on behalf of the entire company, I am so deeply sorry," he said, his voice carrying back to Caroline, clear and unequivocal. "There is absolutely no excuse for what you experienced." Dr. Reed accepted his hand with a nod, her expression calm and unreadable. "Marcus, thank you for coming out. I was beginning to think your standards had slipped." Her words were soft, yet they landed with the force of a physical blow. "They won't again," Marcus promised, his jaw tight. He gestured back toward the lounge. "Please allow me." He personally escorted Dr. Reed toward the Orion Club, his hand hovering respectfully at her back. As they approached, the few guests milling near the entrance took notice of the CEO's extreme courtesy to the woman who just an hour ago had been denied entry. The smirking businessman from earlier, now sipping a complimentary champagne, suddenly found his glass very interesting, refusing to make eye contact. Caroline felt rooted to the spot, her mind a frantic mess of denial and panic. It's a mistake, a misunderstanding, a different Evelyn Reed. But as they drew closer, Marcus's eyes, cold as chips of ice, found hers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet fury radiating from him was more terrifying than any shout. "Caroline," he said, his voice dangerously level, as he and Dr. Reed came to a halt directly in front of her podium. "Allow me to make a proper introduction. This is Dr. Evelyn Reed." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "I believe you two have already met." Caroline's face, already pale, lost its remaining color. She looked from Marcus's stony expression to Dr. Reed's placid, observant gaze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. A strangled, "Mr. Thorne, I can explain," was all she could manage. "Can you?" Marcus countered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Can you explain why one of the most important figures in this company's history was treated like a trespasser? Perhaps her name sounds familiar to you. Caroline Reed Innovations." The name hit Caroline like a physical shock. Reed Innovations. It wasn't just a name from financial news, it was a name she had seen on internal memos. A major investor group. The major investor group from the Series B funding round. Marcus wasn't finished. He gestured with a sweep of his hand toward the far wall of the lounge, a feature wall made of polished black marble designed to showcase the company's benefactors. It was the centerpiece of the room. "You walk past it every day, Carolyn. Did you ever bother to read it?" He led Dr. Reed inside, and Carolyn, as if pulled by an invisible string, followed them, her legs feeling like lead. Marcus walked directly to the marble wall. Under the soft, recessed lighting, engraved in elegant brass lettering, was the list. Ascendia Global, founding investors and key partners. The list was short and prestigious. Ethelred Holdings, the Rossi Group, and there near the top in clean, bold letters that seemed to glow with a terrible significance. Reed Innovations. Dr. E. Reed, Caroline, stared at the name, her vision blurring. Dr. E. Reed. Evelyn Reed. The connection was brutally, horrifyingly clear. The woman she had judged on her appearance, the woman she had deemed unworthy, was not just a guest. She wasn't just an investor. She was in a very real sense the owner. Her capital had funded the very marble on which her name was engraved. The floor Caroline stood on the chair she sat in, the salary that paid her rent, all of it was tied to the woman she had just insulted. The silence in the lounge was absolute. Everyone was watching. The junior hostess Brenda looked on with wide, horrified eyes. The businessman who had smirked now looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Marcus turned his back on the wall and faced Caroline. His voice was no longer angry. It had become something far worse, detached, clinical, and utterly final. "Caroline, I believe you and I need to have a conversation. In your office. Now." He then turned to the stunned junior hostess. "Brenda," he said, his tone softening fractionally. "Please escort Dr. Reed to our presidential suite. It's the private room at the end of the hall. See to it that she has anything, and I mean absolutely anything, she desires." Champagne food from any restaurant in this airport, a masseuse if we can find one. It is all complimentary. For life. Do you understand? Brenda jolted into action, nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. She hurried to Dr. Reed's side. This way, doctor, she said, her voice filled with awe and apology. Evelyn gave Marcus a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a look of triumph, but of somber acknowledgement. This was the necessary unpleasant business she had foreseen. As she walked away following Brenda toward the exclusive inner sanctum of the lounge, she didn't cast a single glance back at the woman who had misjudged her so catastrophically. Caroline Vance was no longer relevant to her. She was simply a problem being solved. And as she watched the CEO turn and walk toward her small glass-walled office, Caroline knew her career as she knew it was over. The unveiling was complete. Now came the execution. Caroline's office, usually her personal sanctuary of authority, suddenly felt like a transparent cage. The glass walls that were meant to convey a sense of modern open management now seemed to put her on display for the entire lounge to witness her downfall. She sat behind her desk, her hands trembling in her lap, while Marcus Thorne stood before her, not even bothering to take a seat. He was a figure of pure, undiluted corporate wrath. He didn't speak at first. He simply pulled out his phone, tapped a few commands, and then placed it on her desk screen up. It was playing the security footage from the front podium, recorded less than 2 hours ago. There was no audio, but none was needed. The video showed it all in stark, silent clarity. Dr. Reed's polite approach, Caroline's dismissive scan, the lie about the system error, the fawning welcome she gave to the man behind Dr. Reed, and the final mortifying moment, the condescending lean-in, the gesture toward the public concourse, the offer of a soda voucher. Watching it play back, stripped of her own internal justifications, Caroline saw only the raw, ugly truth of her actions. It was a portrait of blatant prejudice. When the clip ended, Marcus finally spoke his voice, a low, dangerous rumble. Tell me, Caroline, which part of that interaction aligns with the Ascendia global brand promise? Mr. Thorne. I was following protocol. She stammered the word, sounding hollow even to her own ears. Her pass registered an error. I was protecting the security and exclusivity of the club. I made a judgment call. A judgment call. Marcus repeated the words, tasting like poison in his mouth. You're damn right you made a judgment call. You judged a woman based on the color of her skin and the fact that she wasn't wearing a Rolex. You didn't see a world-renowned scientist, a biotech pioneer, or a key investor who holds a significant stake in this company. You saw someone you decided in an instant didn't belong. He leaned forward, his hands pressing flat on her desk, forcing her to meet his gaze. Let me educate you on the consequences of your judgment call. Dr. Evelyn Reed could, with a single phone call, initiate a divestment process that would cripple our stock price. She could sue us for discrimination, and based on this video, she would win a settlement that would make headlines globally. She could describe this experience to her peers in the investment community, people like the Rossi Group and Ethelred Holdings, and suddenly our next round of funding for expansion into the Asian market would evaporate. He stood up straight, pacing the small office like a caged panther. You didn't protect the lounge's exclusivity, Caroline. You jeopardized the entire multi-billion-dollar corporation. For what? To feel powerful for 5 minutes. To enforce some pathetic unwritten dress code that exists only in your own narrow mind. Tears of panic and humiliation began to well in Caroline's eyes. I didn't know who she was. If I had known... That's the entire point, Marcus snapped his voice, finally rising. It shouldn't matter whether she's Dr. Evelyn Reed, our largest angel investor, or Jane Doe, a high school teacher from Ohio, who saved up for a year to buy a day pass for her anniversary trip, she should be treated with the same fundamental level of respect and dignity. Your failure wasn't that you didn't recognize her. It's that you believe there's a difference in how people should be treated. That is a cancer within our organization, and I am cutting it out. Starting now. He stopped pacing and stood before her, his expression turning to one of cold, final business. Your employment with Ascendia Global is terminated effective immediately. Pack the personal belongings from your desk. Do not speak to any other members of staff. A security team is on its way to escort you from the premises. Your final paycheck, minus any outstanding liabilities, and calculated strictly according to your contract, will be mailed to your home address. There will be no severance package. He paused, delivering the final blow. Furthermore, a note will be placed in your file. You will be permanently blacklisted from any and all properties owned or operated by Ascendia Global and our extensive network of hospitality partners. Your career in this industry at this level is over. Caroline stared at him, speechless. It was a corporate execution, swift and merciless. Her ambition, her pride, her career, all of it was being incinerated before her eyes. Marcus turned and left the office without another word. He stepped back into the main lounge, where a palpable tension hung in the air. The staff were frozen, pretending to work, but watching him intently. He addressed them as a group, his voice now calm, but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "May I have your attention, please? As of this moment, Caroline Vance is no longer with the company. Effective immediately, Brenda, you are the acting lounge manager. I expect you to lead with the grace and professionalism that was so sorely lacking today." Brenda looked utterly shocked, but she straightened her shoulders and nodded. "Yes, sir." Furthermore, Marcus continued, his voice resonating through the silent room. "Effective Monday, there will be a new mandatory company-wide retraining program for all guest-facing employees. It will focus on implicit bias, de-escalation, and inclusive hospitality. Completion will be required for continued employment. Let me be perfectly clear to everyone, the kind of behavior that occurred here today is a fireable offense. No warnings, no second chances. We are a global brand, and we will reflect the global community we serve. Is that understood?" A chorus of "yes, sir" came from the staff. The message had been received not just by them but by the guests who were listening intently. The reckoning was complete. It was brutal, efficient, and absolute. And as two uniformed airport security officers walked past him and into Caroline's glass-walled office, Marcus Thorne knew he had done what was necessary to cauterize the wound. Now he had to go and apologize once more to the woman who had been forced to expose it. The presidential suite was a world away from the rest of the lounge. It was a secluded haven of understated luxury, with its own private bathroom, a fully stocked bar, and a plush chaise lounge overlooking the airfield. Dr. Evelyn Reed sat not on the chaise, but at a simple work table, her laptop open. The glass of vintage champagne Brenda had brought her sat untouched. When Marcus Thorne entered, she was in the middle of a video call, the screen showing the faces of her board members at Reed Innovations. She held up a single finger, professionally asking for a moment. "And the Phase 3 trial data for RX-714 is conclusive. We're ready to file with the FDA. I'll be in LA tomorrow to finalize the paperwork with the legal team. I'll circle back with you all then." She ended the call and turned her calm, discerning eyes to Marcus. The incident, as monumental as it was for Caroline and Ascendia Global, was for Evelyn a distraction from a world of far greater consequence. Marcus stood before her, his earlier fury replaced by a somber humility. "Dr. Reed, Evelyn, I came to apologize one last time personally and without reservation. What happened today was a failure on every level, and the responsibility is ultimately mine. I am the one who sets the culture." "Yes, you are," Evelyn agreed, her tone not accusatory, but factual. "What actions have you taken?" "The manager responsible has been terminated," Marcus stated. "Her entire team will undergo immediate and intensive retraining, a program I am now rolling out company-wide. And I've made it clear that such actions will have zero tolerance going forward. I've appointed the junior hostess Brenda as the interim manager. She showed you kindness." Evelyn nodded slowly, processing his words. She appreciated the decisiveness. "Good. Firing the individual is a necessary step, Marcus, but it's the easy one. A single weed can be pulled, but that doesn't treat the soil. Your challenge is the soil." She finally picked up the champagne glass, but didn't drink. She swirled the liquid, watching the bubbles rise. "This was never about me getting a free glass of champagne or access to a comfortable chair. I have a comfortable home. I have my own jet. This lounge is a convenience, not a necessity for me. But it is a symbol." She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze penetrating. "It's about the next person who walks up to that desk, the young black entrepreneur who has scraped together enough to fly business class for the first time to meet a potential investor. The South Asian doctor returning from a medical mission, exhausted and not dressed in designer clothes. The person who doesn't have your personal phone number. Marcus, will they be treated with dignity, or will they be judged by a gatekeeper with a narrow worldview and a fragile ego?" Her words landed with quiet power. This was her true purpose, not vengeance but change. She was using this ugly moment as a lever to create a better system. "You sell an image of elite global sophistication," she continued. "But sophistication isn't about the brand of watch someone wears. It's about the ability to see value and humanity in everyone. Your culture must be as forward-thinking as your business plan. That is the new standard you must set." Marcus felt the full weight of her wisdom. She wasn't just an investor scolding a CEO. She was a leader mentoring another. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with genuine conviction. "You are absolutely right, and I promise you I will not fail in this." "I hope not," Evelyn said, "because my investment in Ascendia wasn't just in your balance sheets. It was an investment in your vision. It's time the vision was made clear to everyone who wears your uniform." An announcement for the boarding of her flight to Los Angeles echoed faintly from the main terminal. Evelyn stood up, gathering her things. She was finished here. She walked out of the suite, Marcus following a respectful pace behind her. As they passed through the main lounge, the atmosphere was transformed. The staff, now led by a nervous but determined Brenda, moved with a new sense of purpose. As Evelyn approached the exit, she paused and looked at Brenda. She gave the young woman a small, encouraging smile and a nod. It was a simple gesture, but it was a transfer of grace, a vote of confidence that Brenda would never forget. Dr. Evelyn Reed walked out of the Orion Club and down the jet bridge without looking back. She wasn't leaving a scene of drama. She was leaving a work site where a critical, painful, and necessary repair had just been completed. Her focus was already thousands of miles away, on the next problem, to solve the next innovation, to fund the next piece of the world, to change for the better. She had been denied access, but in the end, she had opened a door for countless others, ensuring that the measure of a person would be based on the content of their character, not the assumptions of a gatekeeper. Hours later, cruising at 39,000 feet in the corporate jet that bore the Ascendia Global logo on its tail fin, Marcus Thorne was not relaxing. The plush leather seat and the glass of untouched Macallan 18 on the table beside him were props in a life he was too consumed to enjoy at that moment. He was on his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard, dictating a series of searingly direct memos to his entire executive team. The subject line on each was the same: mandatory protocol overhaul and cultural mandate. The incident at JFK had been a near miss with a corporate iceberg. It had exposed a deep systemic rot he hadn't seen, a complacency that had festered under the guise of maintaining standards. Evelyn Reed's quiet, analytical fury had been the alarm bell that woke him up. He wasn't just grateful she hadn't sued or divested, he was profoundly impressed by her. She had possessed all the power to burn his company to the ground, but had instead chosen to hand him a fire extinguisher and a blueprint for rebuilding it stronger. He owed it to her, and to the integrity of his own brand, to follow through with absolute commitment. His first memo was to HR greenlighting the most expensive and comprehensive implicit bias training program on the market. His second was to operations outlining the new zero-tolerance policy. His third was to the board explaining the situation and his corrective actions, framing it not as a crisis, but as a pivotal moment of growth. He was spinning, fixing, and fortifying. The work had just begun. For Caroline Vance, the work had just ended. The walk from the Orion Club to the airport exit was the longest of her life. Flanked by 2 impassive security guards, she was acutely aware of the stairs. Travelers, people she would have considered beneath her notice an hour ago, watched her with pity and curiosity. She was no longer Caroline Vance, the impeccable manager of an exclusive club. She was just a woman in a sharp suit, being unceremoniously ejected from her post. The automatic doors slid open, and the humid New York air hit her. She was outside, stripped of her badge, her authority, her identity. The taxi ride to her Queen's apartment was a blur of self-pity and rage. The apartment, which had once felt like a stylish, minimalist sanctuary, now seemed small, cheap, and suffocatingly quiet. The sleek grey couch and chrome coffee table were a pathetic imitation of the luxury she had just lost. She threw her keys onto the counter with a clatter that echoed in the silence. Her first instinct was denial. This was a nightmare. Marcus had overreacted. He would call her tomorrow once he'd calmed down and apologize. He had to. She was his best manager. She had the highest customer satisfaction scores, or at least the highest scores from the customers she deemed important. But as the hours ticked by, denial curdled into a bitter, panicked anger. It wasn't her fault. The woman Dr. Reed hadn't looked the part. She was dressed for a gym, not a multi-million-dollar lounge. It was a setup, a test, one she had unfairly failed. Fueled by indignation, she picked up her phone. She would show Marcus. She was a top talent. His competitors would snap her up in a heartbeat. She scrolled through her contacts and found the number for Robert Sterling, a regional director at the Sovereign Club Orion's biggest rival. They had poached staff from each other for years. "Robert, it's Caroline Vance," she said, trying to inject a casual confidence into her voice. "Caroline." Robert's voice was cool, distant. "I heard. Bad business at JFK today." Caroline's blood ran cold. Heard. How could he have heard already? "It was a complete misunderstanding blown way out of proportion," she said quickly, a desperate edge to her tone. "In fact, I'm exploring new opportunities, and I thought of you. I don't think that's a good idea." Caroline. Robert cut her off, his voice flat. "Marcus Thorne is on a warpath, and nobody in this industry wants to be in his line of fire, especially not by hiring the person who insulted one of the biggest private equity players on the Eastern Seaboard. You're radioactive right now. I've got to go." The line went dead. Caroline stared at her phone, the silence screaming in her ears. Radioactive. The word echoed the finality of Marcus's threat. The blacklist wasn't just within Ascendia Global. It was an invisible, unspoken agreement among the elite players. She was out of the club, all of them. She sank onto her couch, the fight draining out of her. She pulled her laptop onto her lap and numbly opened a job search website. The roles that appeared felt like a cruel joke. Front desk supervisor, Airport Marriott. Hostess, the Cheesecake Factory. Guest services agent, Holiday Inn Express. Each one was a step down a ladder she had spent a decade ruthlessly climbing. The salary ranges were half of what she had been earning. The prestige was non-existent. This was her new reality. The reckoning wasn't just the loss of one job, it was the demolition of her entire career and the smug sense of superiority that had been its foundation. Back at JFK, a different reality was dawning. Brenda stood in the center of the Orion Club, which was now her responsibility. The air was still thick with the residue of the day's drama, but beneath it, something new was taking root. She gathered the remaining 2 staff members, their faces a mixture of fear and relief. "Listen," Brenda said, her voice shaking slightly, but her resolve firm. "I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't have all the answers. But I know what we're going to do for the rest of today. We're going to smile. We're going to welcome every single person who walks through that door as if they were Mr. Thorne himself. Our job is not to be gatekeepers. It's to be hosts. That's it. That's the new policy." Her first test came minutes later. A young couple looking flustered entered with a toddler who was in the midst of a full-blown tantrum and a baby sleeping in a carrier. Under Caroline's reign, they would have been met with a stare so icy it could freeze jet fuel. She would have reminded them in a low voice that this was a quiet lounge. Brenda did the opposite. She came out from behind the podium with a warm, empathetic smile. "Long travel day?" she asked the mother. The woman looked up, surprised and relieved. "You have no idea." "Let me help," Brenda said. "We have a small family nook over here. It's a bit more private. Let me get you all settled, and how about I bring some apple juice for the little one and a glass of champagne for you?" The mother's eyes filled with grateful tears. As Brenda led them to the corner and returned with the drinks, she felt a sense of purpose she had never felt, polishing countertops. This was hospitality. This was the job. Later that evening, an email arrived on the manager's computer. It was from Marcus Thorne's office. It detailed the forthcoming training schedule and officially confirmed her appointment as acting lounge manager, complete with a significant pay increase. The final line read, "Dr. Reed was impressed by your kindness, as am I. You represent the future of this company. Don't let me down." Brenda leaned back in the chair, a chair that still felt impossibly large, and allowed herself a small, shaky smile. The weight on her shoulders was immense, but for the first time, it felt like a privilege, not a burden. Thousands of miles away, Dr. Evelyn Reed stepped out of a black car and into the warm Los Angeles night. Her phone buzzed. It was a brief, formal email from Marcus Thorne, a follow-up to their conversation. It confirmed Caroline Vance's termination, Brenda's promotion, and the immediate implementation of the new company-wide training initiatives. She read it, absorbed the information, and then archived the message. She felt no flicker of triumph, no vindictive pleasure in Caroline's demise. It was simply a confirmation that the system's bug had been addressed. The correction had been made. Her focus was already elsewhere. The lights of the law firm's high-rise building glittered before her. Inside, her team was waiting to prepare the final submission for a drug that could extend the lives of thousands of people. That was her work. That was the battle that mattered. The drama at JFK was a solved equation, and Evelyn Reed had already moved on to the next far more important problem. The ripple effect of her brief, quiet stand would continue to spread, washing away the old guard and creating space for a new, better standard long after she had forgotten it ever happened. What Dr. Evelyn Reed faced wasn't just poor customer service or a simple misunderstanding. It was a stark reminder that prejudice still lurks in the most unexpected places, hiding behind corporate policies and polite smiles. Her story is a powerful testament to the fact that true strength isn't about loud confrontations, but about quiet, strategic resolve. She didn't just reclaim her seat in a lounge, she reshaped the culture of an entire corporation, reminding them that respect isn't a perk for the privileged, but a fundamental right for all. Her experience serves as a lesson: never ever judge a book by its cover, because you might just be speaking to the author. If this story of justice and quiet power resonated with you, please help us share it by hitting that like button. Let us know in the comments what you think about the way Dr. Reed handled the situation. And if you want more true-life stories of drama twists and powerful resolutions, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for listening.